Hello, everyone. I'm a former nursing assistant, and here's my story. When I was in high school about 20 years ago, my grandpa moved in with us. He was terribly ill. Somehow, my mom was able to convince my grandfather, her dad, to move in with us. After he moved in, we were able to take care of him, take him to doctor's appointments, and get his health restored. Unfortunately, that kept happening. So every year or so, he would fall sick. And we'll have to have him moving with us. He'll stay with us for maybe 5 or 6 months at a time. As soon as he's strong enough, he'll go back to his place. He never wanted to live with us in the first place. Some people say that's how old people are. Living with my granddad at home was fun. He would make jokes. He was always excited to see us. And fun fact, he was blind. I had never seen him be able to see. And by the way, I was not born here in America. I was born in Central Africa, this country called Cameroon. So that's where I spent the first 20 years of my life. So he used to be really wealthy back in the day. So he'll tell us about things from back in the day, how business used to be, and a few stories of how he met grandma, things like that. That was really fun. He knew everyone's voice. He was really good with sound, things he couldn't see. And my siblings and I, we took turns. We would take turns in taking him to the doctor's appointments, making sure he ate dinner, give him showers on specific days of the week, and make sure he gets dressed and all that. He was really strong. He was able to walk and all that. So taking care of him was a breeze. Plus, he was a fun person to be around. So we got to really enjoy the time he spent with us at home. A few years later, he was too sick, and unfortunately, this time around, he didn't make it. He went to the hospital, didn't even make it out of the hospital, stayed there about 3 days, and next thing we heard was he passed. At least his passing was peaceful. I want to believe it was peaceful. So that was that. Fast forward a few years later, I came to the US. And here in the US, most of my family, a lot of my cousins and siblings, they chose to go into nursing. So they suggested I go do nursing. I did it for a little bit, but mostly to pay bills and sustain myself while I was going to school for computer science, which I am in now. So I took a job as a nursing assistant at a nursing home at first. And I learned that things here in the US are really different. So I saw multiple groups of people here. One section of people were those that would be out for dinner at the cafeteria, mingle, make friends at the nursing home. And another group would just be isolated in their rooms, waiting for a visitor, perhaps a family. Sometimes I never show up. I got particularly attached with this gentleman. His name was, I'll just call him Joey. That's not his real name, but let's just call him Joey for this video. Joey was having a very advanced stage of cancer, and he was given just a few months to live. His condition was worsening. The pain was increasing. He did not want to do any chemo. So he was in palliative care. So he would get some medicines to alleviate his pain, help him sleep. And that was it. So Joey decided to spend his time and money ordering lots of food just to eat his way out of the sadness and pain that he was feeling. And he'll call me in once in a while to talk to me, and we'll share things, share stories. So every once in a while, when the floor was a little quiet, everyone had everything they needed, I'll go to his room and we'll talk. And it would make me really sad because it was declining right in front of my eyes. One night I could not hold it. And I started crying. I was so devastated that this gentleman that I had known for a few months was going to pass. That was within just the first few months of me starting to help out as a nursing assistant. Even though I had not known this gentleman for too long, it really shook me. So a few months later, he passed, and more residents came in, and eventually more people started passing, and unfortunately, I got used to it, or maybe fortunately, I don't know. So down the line, I started working as a private caregiver as well. I would go to people's homes for seniors that would prefer to stay at home. Usually, these seniors would have kids that would be able to visit once in a while, sometimes multiple times a week, and they'll be able to provide a few things for their parents. Some of them would live in part time, so they'll be there during the day and they go out at night while we caregivers are there. And one thing I realized is, even though this second group of people, the ones that stayed at home, they were closer to their families didn't feel closer to them. All their kids or relatives around that were healthier, that were doing some of the caregiving, they were suffering through it because, first of all, it was tedious having to come home to their loved ones every day and run some errands, or maybe just sit there and watch their loved ones fade away. These people had a more painful experience compared to the nursing homes. At nursing homes, some people were lonely, but the vast majority would be together with the others. They'll play bingo, they'll do activities together, and they'll make friends. But at home, kids to these loved ones were just suffering through it and seeing their parents waste away, or their husbands or any of that just waste away in front of their eyes. And the healthier people, the kids or the relatives, felt like they were getting tied down by the weight of this caregiving. Caregiving is becoming harder. While I sympathize with families that are with loved ones that can do for themselves and they're able to um, put away time and resources to be there for their loved ones and do some of the caregiving, I sympathize with these people because it's really difficult, even especially since I saw lots of them at home with their parents or their husbands or wives and families go through very intense episodes of depression and just break down overall. So while most of these people wanted the better thing for their loved ones, was it really the better option to keep their loved ones at home versus at a group home? More often than not, people prefer to stay at home, but is it really the better option? I think that people prefer an environment that doesn't change much, which all of us do. Home is safe, home is secure. We're used to home. My grandfather, 20 years back, he hated the idea of coming to my mom's because he didn't want to leave his home. We had to fight with him, just to have him come home and stay with us for a few months. But it really worked out. Now, in that scenario, we had lots of people at home. I had about 3 or 4 siblings and some cousins that were living with us at the time. So my mom didn't have to do all of the hard work. We did most of it. So caregiving in that scenario was just enjoyable. As long as we had food to eat. I took care of this gentleman one time. He was almost 100 years old. And he wanted at all costs to stay at home, spend his final hours in his home. That was his wish. Some of his kids, one of his kids, lived in a 10-mile radius. He lived in the same city, basically. The other kids did not. They lived in different states. They really cared for their dad. They were really close to their dad. So they did everything they could to make sure that their dad was comfortable at home. So one week, John's first son, just Jeff was the first son. So Jeff will come in and spend the entire week with dad. But Jeff was older too. Dad was about 100 years old. Jeff was over 65. So he couldn't do very much for dad physically. So that's why they contacted my company. And I was there 12 hours a day, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. And so I'll wake dad up in the morning, give him a little shower, give him breakfast, lunch, dinner, put him back to sleep at 8 p.m., come back the next morning, and so on. So I'll do that every week, every day. And one of the sons would stay for 1 week, and they'll rotate. His other son will come in the next week and stay the whole week. Now, for Jeff, the first son that was local to Oklahoma, that was easy for him. He would spend his entire day at home with his wife and his kids or grandkids, and he would just come sleep with his dad at night. But for the other kids that had to travel across state lines, it was a big hassle for them. So one of his younger kids was having a really tough time because they had to drive 5, 6, 8 hours to come in for their week, and they couldn't do anything. They couldn't see their family, and that created a lot of tension in their home. So it became a scenario where kids were doing the best for dad all the way up until the end, until dad finally passed, moved on. But it was getting harder and harder. And at some point, the kids, I think, in my opinion, at some point, I feel like it would have just been a relief. Death or moving on at some point was more of a relief for family because caregiving was just so intense. Not to talk about the time and effort commitment was one, but not to talk about the fact that these kids would watch their dad slowly go down, deteriorate in health, lose health, lose appetite, lose weight, and just slowly give up. That was the most painful part. And they had to watch that and be there every day. So with that in mind, was staying at home really the best thing? I don't know. I'm sure that, dad, or John, as we call him earlier, I'm sure he probably loved the fact that he was able to stay at home and pass away right there in his home. That was nice. But again, what if he was in a nursing home or a group home? Would it have been different? Would the quality of life be a little better? I don't know. Now, there are horror stories about the nursing home too, but just examining both and seeing. So the point I'm trying to make here is Caregiving overall is really tricky and challenging. And so, all of you out there that are doing one or two things for a loved one, caring for them, you're making a difference. And as for which one is better, I don't know. What do you guys think? Until next time, peace out.